I wasn't supposed to be home that night. I was supposed to be out, just like every other Thursday, meeting with my business partners for our usual late-night strategy sessions. My wife, Emma, had even kissed me on the cheek before I left, telling me to have a productive evening. If only I had known what she was really planning. The meeting got cut short when one of my partners had a family emergency. So, instead of wasting the night out, I decided to come home early. I parked my car quietly and stepped inside, not bothering to announce my arrival. The house was dimly lit, just as I had left it. But as I walked toward the staircase, something caught my attention: voices. At first, I thought Emma was just on the phone. But then I heard laughter, and a second voice, deep, confident, and far too familiar. I felt my pulse quicken. I moved toward the sound, my steps careful, my breath held. The voices were coming from the living room, just past the hallway. I stood there, unseen, listening, and what I heard next sent a chill down my spine. He's so predictable. I told him I was exhausted, and he believed me. Emma's voice carried a playful, almost mocking tone. "That's why this works, babe," the man responded, chuckling. "He's the safe bet. The provider. You and I? We're the ones living." I clenched my jaw. That voice. I knew it. It belonged to my so-called best friend, Derek. Emma sighed. "I feel guilty sometimes. But then I remind myself, what has he really done for me? He works late. He's always so boring. He'd never give me the excitement you do." "Exactly. That's why you need to just do it, babe," Derek murmured. "End it. Take what you can and come with me." My vision blurred with rage. My own wife and best friend, plotting behind my back, scheming like I was nothing more than an obstacle in their way. Emma giggled. "I already moved most of the money into my account. He won't even see it coming. By the time he realizes, we'll be gone." My blood turned ice. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to leave me, to take everything I worked for and run off with him. I stepped forward, just slightly, and the floor creaked beneath my weight. The laughter stopped. Emma's head snapped toward the hallway. And then as she saw me, her face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Derek shifted, his body tense, like an animal sensing danger. For the first time in my life, I saw my wife afraid. And that's when I knew this was only the beginning. For a moment, the room was frozen in time. Emma's eyes, wide with horror, locked onto mine. Derek, ever the cocky bastard, tensed but didn't immediately react. My heart was hammering so loudly in my chest, I could barely hear my own thoughts. It wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditated betrayal. I took a slow step forward, the weight of what I had just overheard sinking into my bones. My own wife, the woman I had spent years supporting, had been siphoning my money, planning to disappear with him. And now they stood before me like criminals caught red-handed. Emma stammered first. "I didn't expect you home so early." Her voice was weak, cracking at the edges. Gone was the confidence I had heard just moments ago, replaced with sheer panic. Derek, on the other hand, straightened his shoulders and scoffed. "Look, man, let's not make this a big deal." "A big deal?" I turned my attention to him, the man I had once called my best friend, and took a slow breath. "A big deal." My voice was eerily calm, though I could feel the rage boiling underneath. "You're standing in my house, talking about stealing my money and my wife, and you think this isn't a big deal?" He had the audacity to smirk. "Look, it was bound to happen, man. You've been so busy working, trying to be the provider." Meanwhile, Emma needed more. Something you couldn't give her. Emma flinched as he said it, as if even she realized he had gone too far. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. My eyes were locked onto Derek. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was about disrespect. This was about a man I had once trusted openly discussing how he had been taking what was mine behind my back. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I wasn't about to give either of them the satisfaction of an outburst. No, that would be too easy. Instead, I turned back to Emma, who looked like she was on the verge of a breakdown. "You drained our accounts?" I asked, my voice still calm, still calculated. Her lips quivered. I just moved some money. I was going to tell you." I let out a bitter laugh. "You were going to tell me? Before or after you were on a plane with him?" Silence. She had no answer. Derek, still trying to play it cool, sighed and reached for his jacket. "Whatever, man. She's coming with me. This whole thing is already done." Emma didn't move. That was when I realized something. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at him. And for the first time since I had walked in, her face wasn't filled with fear. It was filled with something else entirely. Doubt. I almost laughed. Did she think he was her future? Did she really believe that this man, this user, was going to give her anything more than cheap thrills? I stepped back, giving them space. You know what? I said, my tone almost casual. Take her. Emma's head snapped toward me. What? I gestured to Derek. Go ahead. You've made your choice, right? So go. Derek grinned like he had won. Glad you see it my way. He reached for Emma's hand. But she hesitated. And that hesitation spoke volumes. Now it was Derek's turn to frown. Babe. Emma's breath hitched. I smirked. Oh, now you're confused? I crossed my arms. You were so sure of yourself a few minutes ago. What changed? She swallowed hard, looking between us. I could see it, the gears turning in her head. Reality was creeping in. Derek was all fun and games when it was a secret, when it was thrilling. But now? Now he was standing there, expecting her to actually leave with him, and suddenly, she wasn't so certain. Derek scoffed. Don't tell me you're actually hesitating. Emma didn't respond. I stepped closer to her. Let me guess, I said, tilting my head. You were hoping I'd fight for you? Beg? Try to win you back. I chuckled darkly. I think you forgot who I am, Emma. I watched as her face crumbled. Derek, frustrated, grabbed her arm. Come on, let's go. But she pulled away. Emma. My voice was low, firm. You chose this. You wanted excitement? You wanted him? Then go. And just like that, the roles reversed. I was no longer the one being left behind. She was the one who didn't know what to do. Derek scoffed, shaking his head. Unbelievable. He turned to me, eyes burning with irritation. You just love making things complicated, don't you? I raised an eyebrow. Complicated? You came into my house, plotted against me, and you think I'm the one making things complicated? Derek rolled his eyes. Whatever. You'll regret this, man. I laughed. Oh, I highly doubt that. Then I turned to Emma one last time. And you? You were so sure of yourself. Tell me, Emma, where's all that confidence now? She had no answer. Derek sighed. Forget it. I don't have time for this. He turned for the door. I'll be in the car. Make up your damn mind. And with that, he walked out. Emma stood there, shaking. Her plan had crumbled before her eyes. She had counted on me reacting differently. She thought I would be devastated. Instead, I was done. I turned away from her, walking past like she was nothing more than a stranger. Be sure to lock the door when you leave, I muttered. And then, without looking back, I went upstairs. Because I already knew this wasn't over. Not even close. I barely slept that night. Not because I was heartbroken. No, that ship had sailed the moment I heard Emma and Derek whispering about how boring and predictable I was. What kept me up was the sheer audacity of it all. My wife had been plotting to leave me, empty my accounts, and skip town with my best friend, all while keeping that sweet, innocent act. And now, after watching her world crash and burn in front of her, she was stuck. I heard her moving around downstairs. I knew she hadn't left. Derek hadn't come back for her, at least not yet. I imagined her pacing the living room, checking her phone, probably typing and deleting messages, trying to figure out what to do next. She had spent months, maybe years, crafting this plan, only for it to unravel in a matter of minutes. And now, she was in a limbo she had never expected. By the time morning rolled around, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to scream, fight, or do anything she was expecting. I was going to be unpredictable. I walked downstairs, calm, composed. Emma was sitting on the couch, still in the same clothes from last night. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes were swollen from either lack of sleep or silent panic. She looked up at me, hesitating. Can we talk? She asked. I smirked. Oh, now you want to talk? She flinched at my tone. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. I laughed, a genuine, humorless laugh. Oh? So what? I was supposed to wake up one day with an empty house and a drained bank account. That was your plan. She swallowed hard. I wasn't going to take everything. I held up a hand. Spare me the details. I don't care anymore. I just want to know one thing, are you leaving or not? That question seemed to throw her off. She blinked, staring at me like she had never expected me to be this cold. I don't know, she admitted. I raised an eyebrow. You don't know? You were so sure last night. What changed? She bit her lip. I thought Derek would. There it was. The realization that Derek, her grand escape plan, wasn't coming back for her. Let me guess, I said, leaning against the wall. He left, didn't he? Didn't want to deal with the fallout. Probably figured you were too much trouble now that the secret's out. Her silence was my answer. I shook my head. And here I thought I was the boring one. She glared at me. Don't act like you're some perfect husband. You work late, you never notice anything. You made this easy. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. You know what? You're right. I did make this easy. I trusted you. That was my mistake. She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped herself. For the first time, she seemed to really see me. See that I wasn't going to cry, beg, or fight for her. And I think that scared her more than anything else. I pushed off the wall. Pack your things. I want you gone by the end of the day. She gasped. What? You can't just. I held up a finger. Oh, I can. And I will. She scrambled for an argument. This is my house too. I laughed again. Wrong. I bought this house before we got married. Your name isn't on the deed, remember? You were always too lazy to handle any of the paperwork. Her face paled. She had thought she was in control, that she held all the cards. But she had nothing. Where am I supposed to go? She whispered. Not my problem, I said simply. You made your choice. Now live with it. I didn't wait for a response. I grabbed my keys and walked out, leaving her sitting there, stunned. But I wasn't done yet. Emma thought her plan had backfired. She had no idea just how much worse things were about to get. I didn't stick around to watch Emma's breakdown. I knew it was coming, but I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses or watching her scramble to salvage the mess she had made. I had other plans. As I drove through town, my mind was working faster than ever. This wasn't just about kicking her out. No, that was too easy. Emma had spent months, maybe even years, planning to betray me, to drain my accounts, to leave me blindsided. She thought she had the upper hand, but now? Now, she was a ship without a captain, stranded in the very storm she created. And I was about to make sure she sank. First stop, my lawyer. I had been smart over the years, keeping my finances separate where I could, ensuring that if things ever went south, I wouldn't be left completely vulnerable. I knew Emma had access to some of my money, but not all of it. And now? Now, I was locking everything down. Divorce papers, I told my attorney, Mr. Calloway, the moment I walked into his office. I want them drafted immediately. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. You're sure? I let out a humorless chuckle. I caught her planning to leave me for my best friend last night. I think that's pretty damn sure. His eyebrows raised slightly, but he didn't ask for details. That's what I liked about him. He was efficient. We can move quickly, he said, pulling out a few documents. But if she's been siphoning funds, we may need to investigate. I nodded. I want everything accounted for. Every dollar she moved. And I want to make sure she gets nothing from me. Understood. He handed me a few forms, and as I signed them, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just paperwork. This was the first real move in my counterattack. Emma had wanted to play games. Fine. But she had no idea how far I was willing to go. I wasn't just ending this marriage. I was making sure she regretted ever trying to betray me. By the time I got home, the house was eerily quiet. For a second, I thought she had actually done what I asked, packed up and left. But then I heard the faint rustling from upstairs. I walked into the bedroom and found her standing by the closet, a half-packed suitcase on the bed. She wasn't moving, though, just standing there, staring at something in her hands. It was our wedding photo. I leaned against the doorway. Getting nostalgic? She jumped at the sound of my voice and turned to face me, the picture slipping from her fingers. I cut her off. Spare me the fake tears, Emma. You had this all planned out, remember? She exhaled sharply. I don't want to fight with you. Good, I said, stepping closer. Because this isn't a fight. It's over. Her gaze flickered with something. Fear? Regret? I couldn't tell, and frankly, I didn't care. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice small. I shrugged. I'm sure Derek will take you in. She flinched. I don't think that's an option anymore. I laughed. Oh, that's rich. Let me guess, he ghosted you. She didn't answer, but the way she looked down at her hand said it all. Oh, Emma, I said, shaking my head. You gave up everything for him, and he didn't even stick around. That's gotta hurt. She swallowed hard. I held up a hand. Save it. I don't care. Your stuff needs to be out of here by tonight. I don't want to see you here when I get back. Her eyes darkened. You can't just throw me out like this. I smirked. Actually, I can. You never put your name on the house, remember? You always said you trusted me to handle the legal stuff. She paled. Yeah, I continued, grabbing my keys. That was a mistake. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving her standing there, completely and utterly alone. But this was only the beginning. I didn't go far after leaving the house. I parked a few blocks away, sitting in my car with the engine off, just watching the sky darken as the sun dipped below the horizon. The weight of everything was still settling in, but instead of feeling anger or sadness, I felt relief. A strange sense of clarity had taken hold, like I was finally waking up from a dream I hadn't realized I was trapped in. Emma was still in the house, probably pacing the bedroom, still trying to figure out how to salvage what was left. The truth was, there wasn't anything to salvage. The trust had been shattered the moment I heard her whispering to Derek, plotting to leave me behind. But what stuck with me the most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how calculated it had been. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a plan. A well-thought-out, deliberate plan that I was never supposed to uncover. And now, she was the one left scrambling. I checked my phone. A new message from my lawyer. Lawyer, I've filed the initial paperwork. Everything is in motion. I'll need a bit more information on the bank transfers, but we should be able to establish what was moved where. Let's set up a meeting next week to go over your financial protection. Good. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about securing my future, making sure she couldn't twist this into something that would leave me vulnerable. I had worked too hard for what I had, and I wasn't about to let it slip away because of her choices. I exhaled slowly, setting my phone down on the passenger seat. My mind drifted back to Emma. Would she even leave tonight? Or would she try to negotiate, try to twist things in her favor one last time? I knew her well enough to know she wouldn't go without at least trying to regain control. Well, she was about to learn that she didn't hold the cards anymore. I started the engine and turned the car toward home. Time to see how she planned to play her last hand. The house was eerily quiet when I walked in. No sound of movement upstairs, no muffled sobs or hurried phone calls. Just silence. I made my way to the living room, glancing toward the staircase. I knew she was still there. Her car was in the driveway, and she hadn't sent a single message since I left. That meant she was waiting, planning. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, taking my time. If she wanted to talk, she could be the one to come to me. I wasn't going to chase after her. And sure enough, after a few minutes, I heard the soft creak of the floorboards. She appeared at the edge of the kitchen, arms crossed, looking uncertain. Can we talk? I took a sip of water, then set the glass down. Depends. Are you about to tell me something I don't already know? She hesitated. I didn't think things would end like this. I raised an eyebrow. How did you think things would end, Emma? You disappear with Derek, take my money, and live some fantasy life? Or did you expect me to just accept it and let you come back whenever things didn't work out? She winced. That's not fair. I let out a quiet laugh. Fair? Emma, do you even hear yourself? I shook my head, leaning against the counter. You spent months planning this. You moved money. You lied. You had an exit strategy. The only thing you didn't count on was getting caught. She looked down at the floor, shifting uncomfortably. I never wanted to hurt you like this. I studied her for a moment. Did I believe her? Maybe, in some twisted way, she thought she had reasons that made sense to her. But in the end, intentions didn't change outcomes. I'm not interested in apologies, I said finally. I just want you to be out by tonight. Her eyes widened slightly. What? You heard me. I crossed my arms. You made your choice. Now live with it. For a moment, I thought she might argue. Might try to plead for more time, to find some excuse to stay. But something in my expression must have told her I wasn't budging. She nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Okay. I didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked away. And I let her go. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves as the last light of the sun faded beyond the horizon. I sat in the dimly lit living room, the only sound coming from the slow, steady ticking of the clock on the wall. The house felt emptier than ever, and yet I welcomed the silence. It was a reminder that I was in control again, that my life was no longer entangled in a web of deception and betrayal. Upstairs, I could hear the occasional thud of Emma moving around, her suitcase dragging against the floor, dresser drawers opening and closing. She was stalling, taking her time. I knew what she was doing. She was hoping that, at some point, I would come up, stop her, tell her she didn't have to go, that we could talk things through. But I wasn't going to. I remained seated, staring at the darkened television screen, my reflection barely visible in the black glass. I had already said everything that needed to be said. The moment I heard her and Derek conspiring against me, she had stopped being the woman I thought I married. She had already left me long before I found out the truth. Tonight was just making it official. The front door creaked slightly as a breeze passed through the cracks. The house had always made these small noises, but now they felt different. Less like the echoes of a home and more like the shifting of a space that was ready to be mine again. No more waiting up for her. No more wondering where she was or who she was with. No more second-guessing myself, thinking I had somehow failed as a husband when, in reality, she had been playing a game I wasn't even aware of. Then came the sound I had been waiting for, the rhythmic roll of suitcase wheels moving down the staircase. I didn't move. I just listened as she descended, the hesitant shuffle of her footsteps growing louder until, finally, she appeared in the doorway. Emma stood there, clutching the handle of her suitcase, her expression unreadable. She had changed into one of her favorite coats, the one she always wore when she wanted to feel confident, put together. But there was nothing confident about the way she was looking at me now. So, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. This is it. I let out a slow breath, leaning back slightly. Yeah, this is it. She shifted on her feet, biting her lower lip. I still can't believe it. I tilted my head. Why not? She blinked, as if she hadn't expected the question. Because, she hesitated, gripping the suitcase handle tighter. I thought. I don't know. Maybe there was still a chance we could. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Emma, don't. She exhaled sharply, looking away. I just thought things wouldn't end like this. A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. How did you think they would end? She swallowed, shaking her head. I don't know. I guess I thought you'd fight for me. That made me pause. Fight for her. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, my gaze steady. Fight for what, exactly? A marriage built on lies. A woman who was ready to disappear with another man and take everything I worked for? What part of that was worth fighting for, Emma? She winced, looking down. I wasn't thinking clearly. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. No, you were thinking very clearly. You just didn't expect to get caught. Silence stretched between us. She knew I was right, but she wasn't ready to admit it. After a long pause, she lifted her head, her eyes glassy. Are you sure we can't? Yes. My answer was immediate, unwavering. I'm sure. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and for a moment, she just stood there, as if trying to memorize the moment, the last image of what used to be our life together. But it wasn't our life anymore. It was just mine now. She let out a shaky breath. Okay. I nodded, standing up and walking to the front door. Without another word, I pulled it open, stepping aside. She hesitated, staring at the open doorway, as if stepping through it meant stepping into a future she wasn't ready for. Then, finally, she moved, rolling her suitcase out onto the porch. The cold air rushed in, but I didn't shiver. She turned back, eyes searching mine one last time. Goodbye. I gave a small nod. Goodbye, Emma. And then, without another word, she walked down the steps, climbed into her car, and drove off. I stood there for a long moment, watching as her taillights disappeared into the night. The air was still, the world quiet. Then, finally, I stepped back inside, and I closed the door. The next morning, I woke up to a house that felt entirely different. The air was lighter, the space wider. It was strange. Emma had been gone for less than 12 hours, and yet, it already felt like she had been gone for years. I stood in the kitchen, coffee in hand, staring out the window as the sun rose over the neighborhood. I had spent so many mornings like this, lost in my thoughts, wondering what I was doing wrong. But today, I wasn't wondering anything. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through my messages. There was a new one from my lawyer. Lawyer, everything is in motion. No complications so far. We'll have the final papers ready for signing soon. I smiled slightly, setting my phone down. This was real. It was happening. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control again. I spent the rest of the day reclaiming my space. I packed away the last of Emma's forgotten belongings, dropped them off at a donation center, and rearranged the living room exactly the way I wanted it. Every small action felt like a step forward, a quiet act of rebuilding. By evening, I found myself at my favorite cafe, sipping coffee as the world moved around me. It was the same place I had gone after everything fell apart, but this time, I wasn't sitting there in shock. I wasn't drowning in questions or replaying every moment of my marriage. I was just there, present, at peace. A waitress walked by and smiled. Haven't seen you in a while. I glanced up, realizing she was right. I had been so consumed with my failing marriage that I had stopped doing the things I enjoyed, stopped noticing the little things around me. I smiled back. Yeah, it's been a while. She nodded. Well, it's good to see you again. I watched as she walked away, and for the first time in years, I felt something stir in me. Not longing, not regret, just possibility. I took another sip of my coffee, exhaling slowly. Emma had been my past, but my future? That was mine again, and I was ready for it.